I wanted to let you guys know, for those of you who do not absolutely hate anatomy when the semester is over, that the TA class, which is Biology 23-27, is going to be offered for the first time in the summer. I always teach it spring and fall. Jeff Huffman is going to teach it this summer. Why would you want to take it? It's super fun. You really, really deeply learn anatomy when you have to talk to 60 people about anatomy every week. In addition, quite often you get to do fun dissections. Like, generally speaking, at the undergraduate level, you don't get to do any cadaver dissections. But some of our best TAs do our cadaver dissections, and some of the best dissections were done by our TAs. In addition, it looks great on resumes and applications, and it's a really good way to get letters of recommendation, because we actually get to know you well enough that we could write a good one. Go ahead.
Sorry, what was this?
It's Biology 23-27, which is the TA class. So all of the TAs that you have are either in the class or were in the class, and then I hired them afterward to teach. So there's 5 senior ones: Joe, Chrissy, Ben, Betsy, and Lauren are the senior ones. So I hired them afterward to come back and TA. So that's in the summer. It is obviously not a required course. It does transfer as an elective to pretty much everywhere. And unless you completely are the world's biggest slacker, you will get an A in the course. There are no tests, there are no quizzes. If you do the things that you committed to do, which is attend Jeff's prep session or mine every week, and then assist in 2 labs, then you get an A, right? Which of course helps to bump up your GPA. The other thing that's good about it is it's super duper fun, and people who do well in that course are eligible to take the ProSection course. I don't know if you guys know that we have a ProSection course. ProSection is the dissection that ends up with the cadaver that you guys are ready to study from. And we are one of 2 community colleges in the country that actually has a ProSection course. You don't usually get to cut on cadavers at all until you are in grad school or med school or professional school. So what happens is I go get a cadaver from the body donor program, bring it back here, and about 8 of you guys work on it for an entire semester to get it ready to go into the labs. And you learn a hell of a lot of anatomy, because not only do you have to learn, of course, all of the structures and the dissection techniques that they would need to know, you also, if you are focusing on the upper arm or on the facial muscles, you also have to learn 15 more structures on your area, and then all of the students teach all of their structures to each other. So it's really, really, I love dissecting. I don't know why. It's like super meditative to me. Like, you know those things that you can do that's like, you start doing it and then 4 hours pass and you felt like it was 45 minutes? That's how I feel about dissecting. I'm like, oh my God, I haven't eaten all day. I should probably go eat something. And that makes me really hungry too, which is weird. Just a little push. Oh, one last thing. Summer registration is open now. Yeah? I don't remember when fall opens. It's soon. When? April 9th? Okay. If you are planning on registering for fall and you're planning on registering for phys, if you're planning on taking my phys class, you certainly don't have to. But if you were planning on taking my phys class, it will fill up within 5 minutes of when it opens. So you need to make sure that you are like ready for that. And a lot of other people's phys classes do too. And they changed the policy so that there's no way in hell that I can get you in if it fills up. There's no way. I can't even let you wait for 2 weeks the way that I used to. So make sure that you protect your grades like that, or protect your schedule like that. Okay, so we're going to finish the heart, and then we are going to start doing vessels. You guys are going to start vessels on Friday. How many of you guys got to dissect a pig heart this week? Yay! Only 1, 2? Why are you guys not dissecting pig hearts? You're going to do it today. Okay. If you go in and they try to give you a sheep heart that's not red, ask if there are any pig hearts. They probably don't realize that there's still some in the fridge. So ask for them, because they're way, way better, more interesting, easy to see how the valves function. Go ahead.
Oh, yeah. No, it's just...
Did you get to dissect one?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So, yeah, well, the sheep are fine, but the pigs are better because they're fresh and they're easy to see things and they're pretty much the same size as humans. So advocate for yourself, right? If you want to do it. The worst thing that could happen is they say no, right? Okay, so we are going to finish the heart today, and the last thing that we have, just this last couple pages. So I want to talk about blood supply to the heart. So we've been talking about how blood goes through the heart, but we haven't been talking about how blood supply goes to the heart. This is one of those things, you probably have these too, in which you misunderstood something for an embarrassingly long time. I just could not, for a ridiculously long time, understand how an organ that was constantly full of blood could ever have not enough blood and you could have a heart attack. It's because I was being a dimwit, and I will share this with you because I did not put together the fact that the blood that is going through the chambers of the heart is of course not connected to the capillaries of the heart. And the only place that you get gas exchange is capillaries, right? So the blood going through the heart is not directly related to the blood that's going to the heart. So what we are going to talk about now is the blood that is actually delivering oxygenated blood to that systemic organ, which is the heart. Does that make sense to you guys? Okay, so the blood supply to the heart. Now, the heart is a blood hog. The brain and the heart and the kidneys take so much of your blood. The heart only usually weighs about a pound or a pound and a half, but it takes 1/20th of your blood supply. It's really, really greedy for blood. And it actually gives itself blood first. It gets first dibs on the blood. So you guys tell me before I even tell you, the blood that's going to the heart would be directly supplied from which vessel? So think about it. It's a systemic organ. All systemic arterial blood flow comes from which vessel? Yeah, it comes from the aorta, right? So why did I misunderstand it for so long? Well, first of all, I just didn't get the concept. And second, you can't see it branching off of the aorta with an intact heart. So let me show you. So this figure right here is showing you the systemic arterial flow to the heart. Please note that the very first two branches off the heart go to the heart. First dibs, yeah? But you can't see them because this one right here tucks back behind the pulmonary trunk and under the left auricle, right, before it pops out on the surface. So you can't really see where that's coming from. So this vessel that's on the surface is going to deliver most of the blood to the left ventricle. And then this other guy right here goes under the right auricle and then runs around in the coronary sulcus. So you can't really see the way that they're attached, unless of course you peel back the auricles, which is a cool thing to do if you haven't already done your sheep heart dissection. After you get done with everything, peel back the auricles and see if you can find the vessels. So, go ahead.
I was just confused. So, you said the aorta takes blood to the heart?
Yes.
So, that just confused me.
Okay, so here's the thing. The aorta is taking blood away from the heart chambers, but it's delivering blood to the heart muscle.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Through the arteries.
Yes, through the arteries. Yes. That makes sense? Okay. So since the heart itself is a systemic organ, it has to both get blood out of it and get blood back to it. Yes? Okay.
The blood inside the aorta isn't going to.
The blood inside the aorta is leaving the chambers of the heart and immediately branching to deliver blood to the muscle of the heart. Is that okay? Okay. So let's get blood to all of the big parts of the heart. So these are going to be called, collectively, they're called the coronary arteries. And you have to know a few of them. You don't have to know all of them because some of these are so variable in people that unless you're a cardiologist, you don't really have to know every single one of them, but you do have to know some of them. Okay, so let's look at this one. This first one right here is going to branch immediately from the ascending aorta. The only two branches of the ascending aorta are these coronary arteries, okay? Immediately from the ascending aorta, it tucks back behind the pulmonary trunk and under the left auricle. And the only place that you could actually label it is right here before it branches. This is the left coronary artery. Let's see what it would look like on an intact heart. You would only be able to label it right there unless you pulled up the auricle. So that's the left coronary artery. Why only there? Because it changes names after it branches. Okay, so that's the left coronary artery. And then it is going to branch into some really important arteries. This guy right here is the anterior interventricular artery. It runs in a sulcus that you should be able to figure out. What is it? Anterior interventricular sulcus. In clinical terms, it's more commonly referred to as the LAD, the left anterior descending artery. It's really super important because it delivers blood supply to most of the left ventricle. Okay, and the left ventricle is really, really energetically expensive and needs lots of blood. Why? Yeah, it's a super thick and muscular, it's a hog. They call this guy right here the widowmaker. Because if you get arteriosclerosis or atherosclerosis that clogs down, that shuts down blood supply to the left ventricle, that's going to be a serious heart attack and potentially a deadly heart attack. Does that make sense? Okay, so this is the anterior interventricular artery, and it runs in the sulcus right on top of the interventricular septum, right? And then its buddy right here is going to wrap around the backside. This is called the circumflex artery, and it'll run in the coronary sinus. So let's look for that one. So here's the anterior interventricular artery, or the LAD, and then when it goes this direction, it's called the circumflex. And the circumflex wraps around the backside, okay? So there are other arteries branching off of here, but they're variable in people, so we don't have you learn all of them. Okay, so those two are the ones that you need to know. The circumflex, by the way, does most of the blood supply to the back part of the ventricle. All right, and then over here, guys, this other branch off, the only other branch off the ascending aorta is this guy right here. This is the right coronary artery, and it goes under the right auricle. Okay, it's got a bunch of branches. You don't have to know most of them, but it's still called the right coronary artery all the way around as it goes through the coronary sulcus. It's still right coronary artery, okay? You're going to have two branches off of it. I'll tell you that in just a second, but let's find it, okay? So it's right coronary artery all the way around here, yeah? And then if you flip the heart around backwards, it's still right coronary artery back here, okay? Now, there's two branches that you need to know off of it. And the branches are this guy right here that runs close to the right margin of the heart as it's kind of sitting in the heart or sitting in the thoracic cavity and flipped. This is called the right marginal artery, or sometimes they just call it the marginal artery because there isn't a left one. So even in this textbook, they actually labeled it two different ways on two different pictures because look, it's right marginal right here. And it's just marginal there. So I don't care if you put the right on or not off because there isn't a left one. It doesn't make any difference to me, okay? So it runs near the margin, okay? And then if you keep going around the back side of the heart, watch. Right coronary artery, yeah, all the way around the back side. And then when it dips down right there on the back, that's the posterior interventricular artery, and it's running in a sulcus that you know, yeah? Posterior interventricular sulcus. Does that make sense? Okay, which is sitting on top of the interventricular septum. So here it is right here, posterior interventricular artery. Okay, so you could probably figure out what the posterior interventricular artery is delivering blood to, right? It's delivering blood to the backside mostly of the right ventricle, right? Which direction would blood be flowing through the posterior interventricular artery? Down, yeah? That make sense? Okay, you got it. So what is going to happen, although it's invisible in this figure, is all of those arteries plus whatever other ones you have are going to split into smaller arterioles, yeah? And then the arterioles are going to lead to capillary beds, which are deep within the muscle of the heart, yeah? And at the capillary beds is the place that you are going to do gas exchange. You are going to drop off oxygen and pick up carbon dioxide. Terry, what was your question?
So you said the posterior interventricular artery gets mostly the right ventricle?
It does mostly the right ventricle. It does some of the left ventricle too. It's got branches going both directions. Okay, all right. So look how much blood flow. Look how, this is a cast that shows you the arteries in the heart. So we are going to split in arteries and capillaries and veins in the heart. We are going to split and we are going to have capillary supply to almost all of those locations. Please note that the atria get far less blood supply than the ventricles. They're not as active. And look at the left ventricle. Lots and lots of capillary supply to the left ventricle. Does that make sense? Okay, so we're going to go through and we are going to do gas exchange collectively By the way, I didn't teach you the arteries that actually deliver blood supply to the atria just because they're teeny tiny and hard to find, but they do exist up there. Okay, so we are going to deliver all that blood supply, do gas exchange, and then we are ultimately going to have to deliver the venous blood back to which chamber? Right atrium, exactly. Does that make sense? And you don't have that many veins, and they're easy if you just like look at the pattern of these. You do have a bunch of veins, but you don't have to know all of them. So you start on the anterior surface, and you go counterclockwise around the back to the front. Then they are in order: great cardiac vein, middle cardiac vein, and small cardiac vein, if you go in that order. So let me show you all three of them. Ready? This is the great cardiac vein. The great cardiac vein runs with which artery? Anterior interventricular artery. Which direction is blood going to go through it? Up, right? Because it's going around the back to the coronary sinus. So this is the great cardiac vein. It's going to deliver blood into the coronary sinus. Coronary sinus is going to deliver blood back into the right atrium. Got it? Okay. But we got to get a little bit more blood. Again, if you do the order from the front around the back to the front, then you will hit the next one, which is the middle cardiac vein. And the middle cardiac vein runs on the back side of the heart. Which artery do you think it runs with? Posterior interventricular artery. Blood goes up, dumps into the coronary sinus. Got it? And then you keep going all the way around the front side, and you will find this one, which is the small cardiac vein. The small cardiac vein runs near, not usually exactly with, the marginal artery, right? But right kind of at the margin, and it's going to dump into the coronary sinus as well. Does that make sense? So great, middle, small, okay? So what is this whole vessel called as it's running in the coronary sulcus? Even where it's not wide like a sinus, the whole thing is called the coronary sinus, right? Okay, so let's look at it on an intact heart. Ready? Let's look at the veins. What's this vein? Great cardiac vein, okay? What is this vein? Middle cardiac vein. And this guy right here is small cardiac vein. And they are all going to dump into this guy? Coronary sinus, exactly. And it's coronary sinus all the way around. Okay? Do you remember that a sinus is just a wide vessel or a wide space? So that's the coronary sinus, right? So blood flow to and from the heart is pretty darn easy, right? Is that okay? And did I clarify your question? Yeah, that makes sense? Okay. All right, so the other important thing to understand, which I thought was really cool once I finally grasped it, about blood supply to the myocardium or to the capillaries of the heart is that, so let's just think about the aorta for a second. When the ventricles contract, blood is going to get pushed into the aorta and pushed into the arteries, yes? All of the named ones and then other ones, right? So we're thinking about the heart. But simultaneously, when blood is pushed into the arteries, you're actually compressing the myocardial capillaries. Because the pump, yes, is pumping to itself. So the interesting thing about the heart is that although when the ventricles contract, you push blood into the arteries, you actually don't allow it to get into the capillary beds. So it's like squishing a sponge underwater. When do you actually take up the water? When you relax. So this is really important to understand about the heart, and that is the relaxation of the heart is just as important as the contraction of the heart, right? So you have to contract, but then you actually have to relax to deliver blood to the myocardium. Have you ever wondered why if you're going into ventricular tachycardia and you're doing this, why you have a heart attack? They're like, hey, you're just beating really quickly because you're compressing the capillaries in addition you're not filling. Does that make sense? So with cardiac muscle contraction, the relaxation is just as important as the contraction because the pump is pumping to itself. Okay, last little tidbit is just the electrical system of the heart. And this is a little hard to understand anatomically because mostly it's a phys story. For those of you who haven't had phys yet, you don't know the words depolarization and action potential and all that stuff really well. So I'll tell the story to you relatively simply. Basically, within the wall of the heart, there are contractile cells which do what you would expect them to do. They contract, right? But then there are other kinds of cells that are specialized, and instead of contracting, they generate an electrical stimulus in the form of ions, and then they pass it off to their neighbors. How can cardiac muscle cells pass messages to one another easily? What do they have? Gap junctions, exactly. So when you have little collections of these electrical cells that are not contractile, but do actually control things, we call them either pacemaker cells, because they do it at a rhythmic pace, or we call them conducting cells because they are conducting the activity of the rest of the heart, okay? All right, so these cells in the heart are located primarily in a few locations, and they're usually in images represented as yellow. They're not super easy to find on specimens unless you look at a histology slide, because they look totally different under the microscope than the contractile cells. So these look like they're nervous tissue because you're used to nervous tissue being yellow, but I'm telling you they're not. They're specialized cardiac muscle cells, okay? And if you have a collection of them, it's called a node. A node. Okay, so this is the sinoatrial node. The sinoatrial node is found just inferior to the opening of the superior vena cava in the right atrium. Okay, this is the atrioventricular node, and it's found in the inferior part of the interatrial septum. Okay, and then this looks like nervous tissue, but it's not. Instead of being a blob of the pacemaker cells, it's chains of pacemaker cells that talk to each other. Okay, so this is called the atrioventricular bundle, and it runs down the interventricular septum, and then it splits into the left and right bundle branches that are still running down the septum, and then it goes down to the bottom and up to the sides as Purkinje fibers. So let me just give you a quick description of how this is actually going to control cardiac muscle contraction. The SA node is the boss in a healthy person. And what it's going to do is about 100 times per minute, it's going to send out an electrical signal to cause contraction in the atria. And the atria are going to contract in the order they got the signal. So your atria are going to contract in what order? Top down. Yeah, right. Does that make sense? Okay, and that's how you want them to contract, right? About the time you get to the bottom, the SA node or the AV node was already on its way to generating an electrical signal, but the SA node overtakes it and says, I want you to do it now. So the AV node does work on its own, but it doesn't work as quickly as the SA node. That's why the SA node gets to be in control. So the AV node, what's going to happen is about the time you finish with atrial contraction, it will tell the AV node that this is the time that I need you to start thinking about ventricular contraction. But here's something I want you to understand. The AV node doesn't directly cause ventricular contraction. Here's what it does. It actually says, okay, I'm going to start generating this electrical signal, but I am not going to talk to the contractile cells. I'm just going to talk to my buddies, the pacemaker cells, a chain of them. So it's passing on the electrical signal. And then it's going to split and pass it to the left and right ventricle, but still not talk to the muscular cells, the contractile cells. You with me? Okay. It is not going to talk to the contractile cells until it gets to these Purkinje fibers. Purkinje fibers are going to start talking to the contractile cells, and then the ventricles are going to contract in what order? Bottom and sides up, which is what you want them to do. In addition, doesn't this whole business force a lag time between atrial contraction and ventricular contraction? Yes, at rest, it forces about 0.2 of a second lag time. What's happening then that's important? Yeah, filling. Does that make sense? It's happening as filling. You don't want atrial contraction, ventricular contraction to be on top of one another. So this whole business forces a lag time between atrial contraction and ventricular contraction, and it also makes the ventricles contract bottom and sides up instead of top down, which is not what you want them to do. And note one other thing. The other thing is that look who gets the first signal even before the walls. The papillary muscles, right? Your little red rovers. You got to tell them that somebody's coming over before they come, right? So you're like, red rover, we're about to start ventricular contraction, even though that doesn't rhyme. And they hold on, and then the walls contract. Does that make sense? So what's going to happen is the atria will contract top down, and the ventricles will contract bottom and sides up. Okay, so this